Hi, I'm the History Guy. I have a degree in history and I love history, and if you love history too, this is the channel for you. 140 years ago today, at approximately 1 in the afternoon on June 5th, 1870, a fire started in the Armenian section of the great city of Constantinople. Although the fire only burned for about 6 hours, it would in that time destroy nearly a full square mile of the city, destroy nearly 3,000 homes, and kill nearly 1,000 people. Well, fires were not uncommon in the 19th century. In fact, the Great Chicago Fire was the same year, 1870. And fires were also not uncommon in the city of Constantinople. In the period of the 18th century, there were 10 fires in the city of Constantinople that were the same size or larger than the Great London Fire of 1666. And yet those fires garnered very little attention outside of the city itself. But the fire in the section of the city called Pera in 1870 garnered worldwide attention and forever changed one of the world's great cities. And it deserves to be remembered. Greek settlers from the city-state of Megara founded the city of Byzantium in the 7th century BC. It was renamed Constantinople when it was refounded by the Roman Emperor Constantine I in 330 AD. Between the 4th and the 13th centuries, the city of Constantinople was by far the largest and wealthiest city in all of Europe. In 1453, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Mehmed II, conquered Constantinople and made it the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Now, contrary to popular belief, the city was not immediately renamed Istanbul. Rather, the popular name Constantinople was used well into the 20th century. The city straddles a waterway that's called the Golden Horn, and that is a horn-shaped inlet of the Bosphorus Sea. And the section of the city that's called Pera is named after the Greek word that simply means across. And all that meant was that Pera was across the Golden Horn from the city center. And in the Ottoman era, that section of the city started to become the foreign quarter when King Francis I of France, the first European monarch to establish diplomatic relations with the Ottoman Empire, built his embassy there in the 16th century. By the 18th century, all of the embassies were located in the area of the city called Pera, and it slowly started to develop a European atmosphere. That section of the city grew as trade with Europe grew, and a trade agreement with Britain, as well as certain political reforms, drew nearly 100,000 Westerners to the city in the later part of the 19th century. Non-Muslim Westerners were generally referred to as Levantines, and they did their business in the part of the city called Galata, but they lived in the part of the city called Pera, and those two parts of the city became centers of non-Muslim life in the city, including the drinking of otherwise prohibited alcohol. As these Westerners tended to be wealthier than the people living in the old city, the section of Pera had larger, more majestic buildings, and a much higher percentage of those were built with stone as opposed to wood, which was used through most of the rest of the city. Created as a separate administrative district, Pera became a test case for European ideas like street cleaning and street lamps. In 1865, there was a large fire in the old city. But the feeling amongst the Westerners who lived in Pera was that they were much better prepared for something like that, and that Pera could not suffer such a disaster. And they were wrong. The fire actually started in the Armenian section of town. A young girl was carrying a hot coal from her family's fireplace to the kitchen on an iron pan, a common thing to do. But she stumbled and the coal tumbled out a window and landed on her neighbor's roof. It started there and quickly spread to Pera. The alarm was raised from the tower at Galata, but the fire crews were poorly trained and ill-equipped. There were very strong winds that day, and even the stone buildings had inflammable roofs. The winds were said to push down the flames in great horizontal sheets that engulfed buildings from the roof on down. The wind died down around 7 p.m. and the fires went out. But in those 6 hours, the fire managed to burn nearly 2/3 of Pera to its foundations. The American and Portuguese consulates were destroyed. The beautiful Naum Theater burned to the ground. The palace of the Armenian Patriarch, the spiritual head of the Armenian Church, was completely destroyed, along with many other churches and mosques. The British embassy, which had been built at great expense and was seemingly invulnerable to fire, had been gutted and nearly destroyed. And unlike other fires in the Old City, these fires gained international attention because it was European buildings that were burned. The New York Tribune summed up the disaster for all the world when it wrote, "The most graphic accounts of the Great Fire of Constantinople failed to convey an idea of its horrors and destructiveness." Whereas the Great Fire of Chicago was seen as the consequence of the rapid growth of a modern city, the Great Fire of Constantinople was seen as the consequence of the limits of the ability to modernize an ancient city. But in rebuilding, Pera took on even a more European design, and an even higher percentage of the buildings were great buildings built out of stone and brick, as opposed to the Old City, where after a fire they tended to just rebuild out of wood yet again. And because the buildings were made out of stone, those buildings in that section of town today are actually older than most of the other buildings in the ancient city, which are constantly being rebuilt out of wood. And still today, some of the most beautiful buildings in Istanbul are in the section of the city that used to be called Pera. And while the fire deserves to be remembered just because of the breadth of the tragedy, it also deserves to be remembered because of the way that it reshaped what is still one of the world's great cities. The fire doesn't mark the end of the history of the section of the city that was once known as Pera and is now part of the area of the city that's referred to as Bayog. The thriving multicultural community endured for nearly 100 years after the fire, but attitudes and policies change. In the 1940s, the government started to institute oppressive taxes against non-Muslims that were intended as a form of economic genocide to drive non-Muslim residents out of the city. In 1948, when Israel became a state, many of the city's Jews abandoned the city for economic reasons and moved to Israel. And in 1964, when there was a political crisis over the island of Cyprus, the government was compelled to expel the city's remaining 40,000 Greek residents. And with them went the multicultural tradition that defined the city of Constantinople. In their void, the area of the city actually became really run down. It became an area of drugs and crime and prostitution that was populated by marginalized immigrants. But in the 1990s, it underwent an era of urban renewal and is now again one of the most fashionable districts of the city. A living reminder of the city's Constantinople past and its Istanbul present. I'm the History Guy, and I hope you enjoyed this edition of my series, 5 Minutes of History, short snippets of forgotten history, 5 to 10 minutes long. And if you did enjoy, then please go ahead and click that thumbs up button that is there on your left. If you have any questions or comments, or you would like to suggest another topic for the History Guy, then feel free to put that in the comment section, and I will be happy to respond. And if you'd like 5 minutes more forgotten history, all you need to do is click the subscribe button, which is there on your right.